Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I am here today at the IRCGN, the French Gendarmerie's Ballistic Lab and Reference Collection, by their gracious accommodation, taking a look at some of the really cool and rare firearms in their collection. Specifically today, a Gevarm D4 submachine gun. Now, you may recognize the name Gevarm. They were a French arms manufacturer. They were actually a subsidiary of the French ammunition manufacturer Gevelot, which was, for a very long time, a very major global manufacturer of ammunition. And they set up a subsidiary company to actually make guns. And they didn't really see much success in military arms, but they did sell a bunch of commercial civilian guns. I actually have a previous video on an open-bolt, semi-automatic Gevarm 22 sporting rifle. That's interesting if you're into that sort of thing. At any rate, they did also experiment with some military pattern firearms. So in 1956, they set up development to design a submachine gun. And it wasn't really something that was expected to win a French army contract, because the French army had just fairly recently adopted the MAT-49 submachine gun, which did everything that this does. The army was very happy with it. They'd spent many years developing it. But just because the army has chosen a submachine gun doesn't mean that there aren't any other state security agencies that might be interested in one. And this is, I think, a substantially less expensive gun to make than the MAT-49. So Gevarm was hoping that they could get some contracts for other security forces. Now, there are two versions of this that were put into production, the D3 and the D4. The only real difference between them is that the D4 has a solid wooden stock. The D3 had a collapsing wire stock, and the D4 is what we have access to today. So this is a fairly simple, mechanically a simple and straightforward open bolt blowback submachine gun, but it does have some neat elements to it. So let's take a closer look. For having only about a 9.5-inch barrel, 233mm barrel, this thing's actually a pretty big, chunky gun. The stock in particular is a lot longer than you would maybe expect, which probably helped contribute a bit to its pleasant shooting, but doesn't make it easy to fit all in camera here. So let's start with, let's start up at the front here. We have a lever magazine release here that we can push in to remove the magazine. So it's going to lock on that little notch right there in the back. This is a proprietary Gevarm magazine, holds 32 rounds, is chambered for 9mm Parabellum. On the left side of the gun, we have a single selector switch. R is for full auto, CC is coupe par coupe, or semi-auto, and S is sécurité, or sûr, is safe. And in safe, the bolt will not go back more than just slightly. Honestly, I'm not sure what these two holes are for. They don't appear to be anything essential. The gun works without them. I wonder if perhaps this was a standard lower frame that was also used for the collapsing wire stock, and perhaps these were securing points for the wire stock. That seems a little clunky to not fill them up if you're putting it on a fixed stock, but it's possible that this gun is a mixture of parts, so not sure about those, sorry. For sights, we have a 2-position rear notch sight, a V notch there. That's 50 meters, and flip it back and you have 100 meters. And that's paired with a fixed front sight, no adjustment here, no adjustment in the rear sight either, for that matter. This is rather MAT-49-like, including this front sling swivel, which is very MAT-49-like. So just sling swivel mounted in the front sight block, very French sort of thing. The rear sling attachment is this slot and bar in the back of the buttstock, also fairly distinctively French. And then we have what appears to have been originally a slip-on rubber butt pad here that has definitely seen better days. That's in pretty poor shape now. It is actually marked with the Gevarm logo, so it was a Gevarm butt pad. Why you would really need that on a submachine gun, not sure, but someone put it on there and now it's going to take a chisel to get it off. Now let's take a look at disassembly. First bit, remove the stock. That's super easy. Just lift it up off the top. It has a little ball bearing detent here, and it's just pressure that keeps it in there. So all you have to do is lift the thing up and off it comes. That definitely helps make the gun a little bit smaller for easy transportation. Next up, we actually remove the bolt and all the internal mechanism from the front. So this is a spring-loaded catch that locks into these little notches on the barrel shroud. So if I push that in, I can then unscrew the barrel shroud like so. That's going to come off. Normally you would then take the barrel out, but the barrel also just slides out. So there's a little locating pin there that's going to fix the barrel in position right there. And then this locking piece just slides out. What's really interesting is that this is also the ejector. So there's a slot, the ejector slot in the bolt is right there lined up with this, and you have a multifunction part there. Next up, we need to pull the bolt handle out, and to do that, I have to push the bolt back to just the right position so that that will lift out, and then the bolt is under quite a lot of spring pressure and comes out the front of the receiver tube. The bolt is very simple. We have a fixed firing pin in the front. We have an extractor there. You'll notice that this is slightly recessed into the back of the barrel. That's another MAT-49-like feature that helps give you some safety in case there is an out-of-battery detonation. If it fires just slightly before it's fully forward, the resulting burst cartridge will be contained inside this sort of pre-chamber area. There's your locking sear surface. Now, to further disassemble, we're going to take this screw out the front of the fire control assembly. This essentially just pushes the fire control assembly backwards, locking it against a lug on the receiver tube. So with that out, I can lift this off, and now you can see that screw goes in here, and it just pushes against this lug to lock this lug against that pin. So that pin, by the way, is this hole. Why they left it as an open hole, not really sure. And then in the fire control group itself, this is on semi-auto. So this resets when the bolt goes over it, and then on full auto, R, it just pulls the sear down. So pretty simple. Again, there doesn't seem to be any real necessary purpose for this hole for a missing part, which is what leads me to believe that maybe it's something intended for a wire stock instead. But very simple fire control group there. And then we get to the back of the receiver. Now that the fire control group is off, we can unscrew the rear end cap. That has the spring, the guide rod for the spring. And then we have a spring and another sort of little guide plug in it, so that can recess nicely over that. So the only marking that that is on the receiver here is just the serial number here, 353006. And that number is also electro-penciled on the bottom of the bolt. I would be pretty sure that these started at 350,000 or maybe 353,000. They didn't make six figures worth of these. And there you go. There is the whole Gevarm D4 disassembled. Simple, fairly easy to produce, a basic tube receiver with some elements welded onto it. The fire control group is another pretty basic set of square plates put together. Nothing very complicated. Simple, effective. There you go. Okay, slight correction here that I want to make. As I'm putting this gun back together after I finished filming, I realized this cannot be the correct spring for this gun, because when you put this all together, and I'm going to install it with this spring because this is what it had here in this collection, but there we go. Once we put this back together, you can see back here, the bolt will only go back that far because that spring cap takes up this much space at the back of the receiver and just doesn't allow space for the bolt to travel all the way backward. So I noticed that when I was taking it apart and figured there was something that would become evident when I was playing with the gun, and now that I put it back together, that's what I'm realizing is that's not the correct spring. So that's an unfortunate side effect of some of the guns in this and other reference collections, is that there are sometimes come into the collections missing parts, and then people put in parts that mostly fit, mostly work, but that's not the right spring for this gun. In February of 1957, the design was presented to the Versailles ETS, the testing body for the French military, where it went through a bunch of testing. It was found to actually be a pretty decent gun. So in their testing, it had about 1% malfunctions, which is to say one malfunction in every 3 magazines, which is not great, but not terrible. It was pleasant shooting, apparently. It was fairly accurate, but they didn't like the sights, which I can concur. The sights are not great. Open notch sights, yeah. The French army in particular had a lot of aperture sights at this point, which they liked. I can understand why they wouldn't really be thrilled with open notch sights. At any rate, the French army wasn't interested in it, but it did make a number of sales to other agencies. So the National Police in Paris adopted these and issued some of them. The CRS, the Compagnie des Républicains Sécurité, motorcycle police used these. That would probably have been the D3s with collapsing wire stocks. And they made a few sales to some Middle Eastern countries as well. So in total, 3,000 to 4,000 of these were manufactured and actually put into use. So not a huge success, but not a complete failure either. As you saw from taking it apart, it's a pretty simple, not a whole lot to go wrong with it, kind of submachine gun. Now, a big thanks to the Gendarmerie for giving me access to film this cool piece in their collection. Thanks for watching.